We have a review of the meeting format. Who's going to do that?
That would be
Is that
great.
me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yes, I'll give some introductory comments. Just take 3 or 4 minutes to do 2 things. Number one, for everybody's benefit, just kind of give an outline of how this meeting fits in the bigger puzzle of what's been happening. And then secondly, introduce Soren, attorney from Up City's Kennedy Graven, who's here to help us with this part of the project. So first, a little procedural background. The city was approached back last fall by My Energy. They expressed the desire to plug a data center in somewhere in the territory and identified Harmony, I think, as a viable option because of the infrastructure that's available here. Our zoning ordinances, as they stand right now, don't address this newer technology since they were adopted many decades ago. And so that put the ball in our court as a community to consider if we want to change our zoning ordinances to accommodate such a use, and if so, how to craft those rules. So that kicked off. I mean, that's a big subject to tackle. We all, I think, pretty quickly recognized, and for many of the reasons you guys here would understand if you've done any paying attention to these projects elsewhere. So that kicked off a series of joint planning sessions where we got together the City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the EDA to more quickly and efficiently learn, bring ourselves up to speed, and get some input from the community. And those happened over the course of the winter months, basically 5 or 6 meetings to that effect, where we brainstormed if we bring data centers into our ordinance, what do the rules look like? We took those notes and then have passed them off to Soren to take and interpret and translate into an ordinance that could be used for our community. And so tonight, the boards are getting a chance to get an explanation of what that ordinance is. Ask questions, learn about it, and I guess learning is the key for as Steve mentioned on the onset, there is an opportunity built in for public comment tonight, not because people don't want to hear from the public, but because just trying to be practical. Tonight's objective is getting through the ordinance, and if we had it open like it did in the prior meetings, that probably wouldn't happen. And also, it felt too big of a task and too rushed to cram the public hearing part of this into the same night. So it was premature to do that. So tonight's about learning. There will be opportunity for public to comment, and that there will be a public hearing as part of the process if this carries forward in some fashion. And so what happens next in the process will largely just depend on how people are feeling after tonight's presentation and what charge they give Soren as what to do next with the ordinance. But simply put, the expectations tonight is Soren will have the spotlight. Council, like I said, and board members will get a chance to ask questions, to learn, and provide input to Soren as well, so that he can take that into consideration. Next part, introducing Soren. So to my left here is Soren Maddock. He is, your bio said 25 years of experience, and I can hardly believe it. You seem too young to have that many notches on your belt, but works particularly as municipal attorney. So specializing in municipal law and doing this for many communities, mostly in the Twin Cities area. I know Monticello, Zimmerman, Plymouth, St. Louis Park are some of the examples of the communities he works with regularly. So he was recommended to us by the League of Minnesota Cities. We're a member of that organization. They provide support to communities across Minnesota. And maybe perhaps most importantly, he spent some time with us in the Driftless. He's a Luther College graduate. So spent some time in Decorah, grew up in Kimball, Minnesota, in Stearns County. And I'm excited that he's able to lend his expertise because not only is he a municipal attorney, but he's been diving into the data center world for these other communities as well. And so although you might call this area law kind of cutting edge as far as land use is concerned, we got somebody here with some experience addressing some of these issues. So that's enough from me. Unless there's anything else from Melissa, we'll give it to Soren to talk us through the ordinance and kind of tell us what we need to know.
Sounds good. Thank you for that introduction. So what I plan on doing is, Alyssa was nice enough to put together a slide deck for the ordinance. What I'd like to do is, my understanding is we have about 2 hours to go through this. I'd like to get a little granular, but also maybe start out sort of at the 30,000 view and then dive in. The ordinance is meant to be the document that, should you adopt it, which we're not here to do tonight. We're here to talk about it, learn about it, and understand sort of the framework for governing data centers, to give the public some information, give them a first look at the ordinance so that when we come back for a public hearing, should you choose to go down that road, that you've at least discussed it one time through, and when you're asked to actually take a vote on it, it's not the first time you've seen it. So I think what I would start out by doing is saying, the data centers are largely new, although they've been in Minnesota communities for a while. They have not been necessarily the same scope or size as what we're seeing applying for right now. We've seen growing concerns about really three areas from what I can tell. That's electricity consumption, water consumption, and now we're starting to see more discussion about noise. And you'll hear a lot of stuff about ambient noise, things of that nature. We have put those items in your ordinance. We will cover those. The other thing that we've seen a lot about is sort of just the overall environmental concerns. And a number of communities have been sued and are facing litigation primarily by an entity called the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. When a data center does require some environmental review, they have been suing based on the, I will say, scoping documents or things of that nature about the adequacy of the environmental review. So this is an area that's somewhat newer. It's something that folks are learning about, and there is some litigation around it. The city of Eagan was also recently sued, sort of in terms of the scope of the idea that they're looking at as it relates to the electricity usage. So it is something that, while there's contentious, while there is new, it is also something that we're all using and needing. And so I think trying to thread the needle of responsibly regulating them, deciding whether data center is appropriate for here, whether it can be cited responsibly, is part of what we're trying to achieve. And so I don't have a vote on this. I'm here to help you with the ordinance. Should you choose to adopt it, that's completely up to you. Should you choose to shelve it or sit and think about it, that's also up to you. There is no proverbial, we have to do this right now. So I in terms of my understanding is we would like to be done by about 8. In terms of format, I will leave it up to you. What I plan on doing is I'm not going to sit here and regurgitate and just read this to you. I have some highlights that I'd like to go over. I think it would be best if there are questions. Happy to take those sort of while we're on that section. If you have a section, if we're going through noise, but you have a question on electricity, maybe we just wait till we get to that section so there's a little bit of continuity. But if there's questions, I can't wait. Happy to deal with them as they come up. So, Mayor, I don't know if that is that okay with you in terms of process going forward?
I seem to have been recently given new material that I haven't had a chance to review that well. But I'm wondering, in relation to a conditional use permit that I think is mentioned in the ordinance, with that, can we be more restrictive? Yes or no? And can we be more lenient? Yes or no? Than the ordinance?
In terms of lenient, yes or no is a hard place to put an attorney.
Please answer the question.
Yeah. What do you want the answer to? Well, what I'd say in terms of more restrictive, let me start there, is I believe you can. The way the ordinance is written is that if all of a sudden after you review the application, and we'll cover in section 5 what's required in the application, if we see something unique about this or that the conditions don't quite cover, then I do think there is an opportunity to be more restrictive, if you will.
Good.
In terms of less restrictive, it's a little bit harder to say, here's the standard. If you think about it in terms of speed limit's 55, but now you can do 56 or 60. Well, we'd have to sort through that a little bit. Really, the criteria are meant to be sort of a floor. And so if you're looking to change it, we may have to look at modifying the ordinance.
Right. So, so the ordinance should be, it would probably need to be changed if you were going to make it more lenient.
Yeah, more lenient, yes. Unless there was something that was just completely inapplicable, and
Sure.
we could take a look at that. I don't have a ready-made example to feed you on that, but If there is something in here that we require that is inapplicable, then I think there is room to waive those requirements.
Okay.
Other sort of questions out of the box? Melissa did. Let me make, we're trusting a lawyer with a clicker here. Let me see if, yeah, sorry. There we go. So just starting, and some of these are going to go quick. Purpose and intent, as you've maybe worked on ordinances in the past, this is meant to be a broad statement of why we're doing it. It puts the reader on notice that everything that flows comes from our idea that we want to regulate data centers, and high level the things we'll look at. I don't plan on going over it much more than that, but this sets the table for here's the items we're going to look at. It gives no necessarily detail about it. Again, the applicability portion tells you where you're going to put them in the industrial technology spot and what we're talking about. And here we are talking about the data centers. Definitions, again, 3 quick ones. We're talking about data centers, data center campuses, and data center energy systems, which the data center energy systems, in my experience, has been primarily the discussion about generators, backup generators, things of that nature. If you've done much commercial or industrial building, it is not uncommon, much like a trash enclosure, to see a generator as a backup source of juice for a commercial type building. The reason they have come into more discussion with data centers is just the sheer amount of electricity that these facilities take. It takes a lot of generators, which is a cause for discussion on a couple points, and we'll get to these, but is both from a noise perspective, not only if you have to use them, but when you're testing the generators, run them once in a while. And then just candidly, depending on the number of generators you have, can lead to some emission concerns that the MPCA may want to take a look at. So that's what we're looking at. 4.1, again, we get into the purpose. We are talking about where we're going to put them. We did pick the industrial technology zoning district. Again, purpose and applicability is a little more defined than it was in the outset. We're starting to talk about what zoning district they'll be in. We go into things like permitted principal uses, permitted accessory uses. Accessory uses can only exist if there's a primary use. And then we get into conditional uses. And Mayor, everyone else, this is pretty much the start of the discussion on the meat of data centers. So we have made them a conditional use, which means under state law, if someone applies for a data center, a data campus, they will have to come to the city, make an application. It cannot be approved administratively, meaning at a staff level. They will have to have a public hearing. So even after if we adopt this ordinance or a form of this ordinance at some point, which will take a public hearing, an applicant who comes in will have to, should we choose to keep it as a conditional use permit, will have to have a public hearing. So the public will be put on notice and be statutorily allowed to comment on it. It does allow you, in terms of the conditions, in addition to the conditions we've had here, what the law says is if there is something they are doing that we think reasonably requires additional conditions, so long as there is a legal nexus between what you're trying to regulate and a condition you impose, law does allow for that. Yeah, did you have a question on, was there a question on that? Okay. So this, under the conditional uses, just simply lists what the various conditional uses in this district would be. We're here tonight to talk about the data center component. We do in 4.6, and we'll get to those, but we do talk about that you are going to have to meet certain approval criteria. We will get to, we're going to spend most of our time tonight on section 5 and 6. Section 5 is what's required to be shown in the application. Section 6 is the actual standards that we're going to put forth to hold them to. 4.7 is usually an area of interest. What 4.7 says is, hey, look, we know that data centers can invoke certain environmental requirements, whether it's an EAW, an EIS, or an AUAR. The start for your environmental review, to the extent one is required, or to the extent you want to ask for that. There's two different things. You have as a local body, you could do one that's discretionary, require it, or if it meets certain other standards, either from their generators or other things, it may be something that the law just says it doesn't matter whether you want to do it or not, you have to. And this is one of the areas, and I don't want to get bogged down on the litigation side of things, but the environmental review is the area where we're seeing the most litigation right now in terms of not necessarily do these things produce the pollution that we're concerned about, or are they loud? But the complaint, if you will, and I'm high level summarizing, is, hey, we don't think that you've quite studied these enough or quite have enough information to make a sound decision on whether there is an environmental impact. So the lawsuits that we're dealing with are really questioning the sufficiency of the study itself. So we are saying, hey, we understand that there is going to be some the potential for environmental review. If the law requires it, it doesn't matter what your ordinance says, but we acknowledge that the law might require it. But it also says that we may choose to, even if the law doesn't require one, we have the discretion to require one. So that is in there.
I have a question.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm Eric Olson. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Board.
Nice to meet you.
We had talked about the environmental review, and I don't want to delay this too long, but my understanding was there would be some type of requirement that was in the ordinance, and this is the only time in the ordinance where I see this mentioned. And then it just says if it's applicable. How do you know if it's applicable?
So the rules spelled out in both the statute and the Minnesota rules, there's a big list that says if you meet this size requirement, if you have this sort of density, if you produce this sort of emissions, you have to do an EAW. So from my perspective, the requirements regarding when an environmental assessment are required are very explicit, very long. I'm not a big fan of repeating what the statute and the law already says, because we don't want to have to try and keep up with it. They occupy that space, so to speak. So it really is a cross-reference back to it. But it's an assurance that to the extent that they have to have an environmental review, they will. But it also leaves the door open of, if the statute for some reason, if you get a smaller data center, there are data centers that aren't large enough to require an EAW. And when that happens, sometimes the community may say, yeah, but this is important enough. We're going to require one anyway. So that's the why. The standards we've put in here are more relating to the zoning aspect, which the environmental part is a big part of that. Because when you do the EAW, if one's required, you get a report that says, here's the things we know, things we may be concerned about. You use that report to develop your findings with a CUP to say, here's what you have to address. And that might be your quote additional criteria or standards.
Thank you.
One more follow-up to that, Jesse Gravel, Planning and Zoning Council. So as we move through that, is that our attorney that advises us on whether it meets that criteria?
Yes.
Because we're lay people, obviously, we need to.
Yep, the attorney, or depending what you use for a planning consultant or your engineer, it depends. You'll quickly know when they have an application in terms of whether it'll meet those standards. It's a pretty straightforward document from my perspective anyway.
So I just want to clarify that for myself and for different people I've spoke to with those. Can you just review us the EAW? Is that the most extensive one?
EIS.
EIS is the most extensive.
So you traditionally have like an EAW is called an environmental assessment worksheet.
Yeah.
That's your first swing at it. You take a look at it, and what you're asked to do at that point is decide, does this require an EIS, the most extensive study, or do you make what's called a negative declaration saying, hey, we've received the EAW, here's what we know about the site, it looks like everything's in order, or if there are a few things that we think we need to address, there are things that can be addressed during the zoning approval process.
Sure. And as someone, I would like Harmony to have the opportunity to entertain a data center here, because I think there'd be great community benefits, jobs, property tax values. We've discussed others, how they would play in or not, possibly a electrical franchise fee. So I look at that as positives. And then when it comes to environmental concerns, you have situations where we've had lots of things come up and never any kind of review at all. If we get a plan if we pass an ordinance and we get some business that comes in and says, yes, we want to put a data center here, we can follow your ordinance. At that time, there could be, just based on that plan, it could require an assessment
Absolutely.
or and I think some people who don't want a data center would like to see, let's get the most restrictive or the most intense one we can get, because it'll take a lot of time and maybe it'll go away and be somewhere else. And then someone who's more pro the data center would like to see the least amount of that that's required by law. Is a plan that comes in itself just what a company brings us and said, this is the plan, this is the size of the building, this is what we're going to use, that that could trigger one regardless.
Yeah, regardless of which side of the spectrum you're on, or pro, against, or somewhere in the middle. If it comes in and it trips one of the levers in terms of based on the size, based on the other things, it doesn't matter. You have to.
Yeah, right.
And we would know that based on the application.
Sure.
And when you do that, what it says is we're going to put this application on hold until that study gets done. So maybe when you've done some of your land use training, you've heard of the 60-day rule, which, you can extend another 60, so you get a total of 120. The law says is if we got to study this thing for the environmental side of things, you're going to put on hold any and all planning review till we get through that parcel, or that part of it anyway. And then you as the local unit would make a determination on whether the environmental review is sufficient on most things.
Yeah. And then one thing I've read, I would say the people who are against the data center have said to me, I've said, one of the big concerns out there is water usage, and we've pretty much decided, and even the size of the property we have, it's, there's not going to be water uses. It'll be a closed loop or an error system. So, but I've had people say it doesn't matter what they start out with. They can just change and start using water, to which I counter, the only place they can get water is from the city. So we have a real hard control on that. And then they would say they could drill a well. And I said, well, that's regulated by the state of Minnesota and the county, so they can't really do that without our allowing it either. Is that something they could do?
So from my perspective, and I'd have to take a look at your code, but there are certain codes that say you don't get to drill a well.
Mhm.
And so that is something you can take a look at. By and large, they want to use your water. To your point, you supply that water. You've got an appropriation permit from the state of Minnesota that says how much water you can put out. From my perspective, in terms of one of the concerns, water is the thing that the cities have the most control over.
Right. Okay.
And I do want to point out something. It's something we'll have to work through in here, and not to jump around, but we're on water. We do talk about mandating a closed loop system. Keep in mind, they are going to have to use water to charge that system to begin with. So it's not going to be a no water use system. It will have some initially to charge it. It just won't be on an ongoing basis. It won't be water in, discharge water out. It'll be more of a closed, to your point, a closed loop system. And there'll be the normal usage, which I don't think there is much concern about sinks and bathrooms and things of that nature, cleaning facilities.
Right.
It's the cooling systems that I think our people are keeping an eye on.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So section 5 starts us with the CUP. This is the application process in terms of what's required. There are 5 different sections. The first one is the project narrative. I won't read it to you, but it goes through a number of things that we're going to be asking them to fill out and tell us why they should be able to come to our community. B is a statement of how the project will meet the performance standards. Performance standards are laid out in section 6. Letter C is a narrative describing the proposed data center site uses and operations. In there, we do want to start to understand, any support items you're going to need. So you've got this big sort of, neutral looking building, or maybe not so big, depending. What kind of accessory structures are you going to need to support it? What kind of generators are you going to need to support it? Where are they going to be? How are you encasing them? How are you screening them? Things of that nature. Letter D, if it's going to be developed in phases, we want to know about it. That is one of the things some of the cities are talking about is don't come in and tell us it's going to be a 20,000 square foot building if you're ultimately going to build a, 20,000, a much bigger building. So sort of the old, with the movie Odyssey out there, I hate to say Trojan horse, but the idea is don't come to us and undersell it and then come back and expect to expand on it. We want to understand the full scope of what you're going to do on that site. We want to understand it up front. We want to understand what full build out looks like to the extent we can figure that out. So that is part of what we're trying to get to. Number 2, a proposed site development plan. There's usually a lot of questions on, sorry. Proposed site development plan. This is sort of the picture that lays everything out, both from a buildings perspective, but some of your topos show us where the any water features are, things of that nature. You'll notice here location of the proposed improvements. That's where you start to get a little bit granular in terms of showing us where everything's going to be, all the way down to fencing, where you have to start to show that you can meet our performance standards with things like evidence that you'll satisfy all the applicable setbacks. We'll get into what those setbacks are going to be. Estimated square footage, impervious surface. Impervious surface can be an issue on some of these things, depending on how much site they're going to be allowed to use. We understand where the roads right of ways are. To the extent there's going to be any streets, things like this. Letter I is what you typically see in your subdivisions if you were, bringing in a bunch of homes with your streets. Some of the data centers we've dealt with do have internal public streets. It's hard to, not all of them do, but we're prepared for that should it come to that. Again, wetlands, water, delineation of any high water levels in number 4. Number 5, this is something that gets quite a bit of discussion, utility impact plan. We want to understand what your electric demand, what any storage capacity you're going to have, backup, i.e. generators. That is the big one you will end up working with. I assume it's My Energy here. But that is usually where we start to see reports from the various providers, whether it's Excel or whoever, in terms of whether it can be supported.
Yeah, well, on that subject, the city of Harmony is not spending any infrastructure on the electrical. My Energy and Maryland Power is totally paying for the infrastructure. With that said, the city of Harmony is going to get a franchise fee, which could be a considerable amount of money, because we are the utility and they're using electricity in our area. So that is a big positive that a lot of people don't understand, because they're in the Harmony's public utility. They are paying us for a large amount of electricity that we have no investment on.
I would just add to that, and maybe even ask a question too. A lot of cities, when they allow data centers to come in, Fillmore County has a rule that businesses can't be out in the county. They have to be located in the city. That's why we annexed the property to hopefully entertain an offer for a data center to come in. most cities are the producer of the electricity and the seller of it. And in this case, we wouldn't be doing that. So is that, how much should or can we do as far as utility? Because they're going to be buying it from the cooperatives that also sell it to us. They're going to be selling it to them, not the city.
It might be something just, most of my experiences in the Twin Cities, I do represent Monticello, which is outside the metro area. My experience has been, it hasn't been the cities selling the electricity. It's these cities providing the right of way for the various utility, whether it's Xcel or whoever. So what cities have tried to do, this is something that Egan is facing right now, is said, well, electricity, we want to make sure, yes, we know you're a high consumer, but we want to make sure that the rest of the residents, it's not curbing other business opportunities or our residents. So what they are doing is limiting, say, the capacity or how much usage those can have. And we have done that in this ordinance. I think we put it at 55 megawatts, if you will. So that's the city's role on that.
And just thinking of, and maybe we'll get into that later, thinking of that number, is that like the average usage over a year? Because if you're doing cooling equipment, quite possibly in the winter time, you'd be using a lot less electricity as far as the cooling side versus a summer where you'd be using more.
I will immediately defer to the engineers on this one.
Okay,
But
good.
my understanding is when we work through it, water is for cooling, electricity is for firing up the units themselves.
Okay.
Maybe there are systems that are electric cooled. I don't know about that.
Sure.
We came up with 55, not because of my understanding, Greg was correct me on this, but is not because of an average or what we're seeing out there, but more along the lines of what my energy is relayed to us in terms of capacity. Okay, that's what we think we can provide for this site and meet all of our other demands.
Sure. Okay.
And if
Because just at the time we did it, we kind of came up with that
That is correct.
arbitrarily. But,
what I would say, to just press pause, the cooling is one of the biggest issues that we're all talking about. I would say that one of the things we are seeing is that we've all heard about the loops with the water and how that works. My understanding that is an area that people are looking into to try and figure out different ways to do it. I'm not able to explain all of that to you. But it's my understanding, there we go, sorry. It's my understanding that is a technology that continues to evolve just because of the acknowledgement that water usage is a concern.
and that's something we would see when a company comes in with their plan. We would
Yes.
see what they're doing.
Yep.
Right.
All right, now I've got two hands going here. So again, and I don't want to necessarily dwell on these. I want to hit the highlights where I hear people concerned about, hey, are you going to take a look at this? We'll get full civil sheets on all the things to make sure we understand where things are coming from. Letter F, put any information concerning proposed grid interconnection is something that comes up. Documentation, including verification from the applicable service providers. So we are going to make them go out. We're not going to just take necessarily the applicant's word for it that, hey, don't worry, this is what we've got. We want to make sure that they're verifying with the provider of electricity that this works. That just because, they don't come in and say, well, we think it's only going to be 55, that there's been some level of verification of those things. We are going to require that. We're going to require that up front, so we're not trying to deal with it on the back end. I would say that these next requirements are some of your just standard things that you'd see for any sort of commercial and or industrial type of developments. We want to, in addition to the electricity and water usage, we want to make sure that they're good stewards of the land, and that includes all of your typical water feature type things that I think you're probably used to dealing with. They're going to have to meet that too. Item 6, I'll click, there we go. A water and wastewater management plan. Again, this comes down to how much water are you going to use, how much water are you going to kick out. It is not. I think one of the misnomers out there is that it's not just a water usage, it's what happens to that water when you kick it out. My understanding is the water is, quote, not very dirty. Out of my lane here, these aren't legal considerations. I'm parroting to you what I've heard in other things, but that it can be hot. And depending on what you've got for a treatment plant, it is something that we want to make sure we're not sending things that the system isn't equipped to handle. So we do, there's a lot of discussion on water usage, not as much discussion from gets kicked out of the system, but that is something we want to make sure we understand also, because we don't want it to wreck our treatment plants. In the city, we have a little bit different with Met Council and sort of the way they process it. But if you've got a treatment plant here, I know that that's been a consideration from some of my communities that have their own treatment plant. So that is something we will look at to make sure that our systems can handle it.
And I just want to bring it up because I've also heard and read out there that there are companies that they're not dumping the cooling, they're using not using water for the closed loop system.
More of a silicate or whatever.
Yeah. And so then that wouldn't be going down a drain, but that would be up to the company coming in, right? What their plan is.
Yep, they'll come to you with their plan on how to cool it, and we'll take a look at it. I'll kick out the word silicate. I can't take you beyond what that in terms of what it means. We'll have to talk to the engineers. I've flipped the page. Some communities are looking at, hey, your water consumption actually means that we may need to drill a new well, things of that nature. They may not, depending on your system, you may have to take a look at that. So I know that in at least one community, there's the idea that we're going to have to do a new water tower, but for you, we wouldn't be doing it. And so they're talking to the applicant about that. So this allows us to make sure we have the infrastructure so that we don't just so one, we can service it, and two, that we're not sending all of our services to a single user, that we still have a good community plan. And so that's what these controls are meant to try and tackle. Item 7, this is one of the bigger ones, the noise study. I would say that in the last 18 months to 2 years that I've been dealing with this, it started out with electricity and water. There's nothing more to see here. It's just a commercial building that looks very average in a community. We're now starting to understand that there are some noise issues or concerns that folks want to deal with. And that, depending on the location, is certainly fair. I would say that we are still learning about noise. The MPCA has restricted communities' abilities to go too far on noise, meaning the state has said, hey, we don't want a hodgepodge of noise requirements throughout the state. We're going to create a uniform standard. Cities, this is what you can enforce, and this is how far you can go. With that said, we are still requiring noise studies to understand what's out there. You'll hear a lot of discussion about ambient noise. That is something that I would say we're in the works of studying and trying to put together an idea of what that'll be. It's fair because when we've reviewed these studies, one of the things that is hard to do is if there is noise, whether you're 200 feet or 500 feet, at least the reports I've read is that is not necessarily a deterrent to noise. If you can hear it at 200 feet, you might be able to hear it at 500 to a degree. So we are looking at, well, what does it require for berming? Are there things we can do to dampen the noise at the building walls, things of that nature, and just gain a better understanding of it? What I would say is the language we've put in your code contemplates, if you've been reading various news articles on noise concerns, we are building in, this is, I will call it the newer version of some of our language. An ordinance that we adopted last year didn't have this language in there. I think we're still working through that. But I would say from my perspective, you have some very good language in your ordinance here, as up to date as possible regarding noise. But it is something that's discussed. It's incredibly fair. Yes.
So in our prior discussions, we have talked about a certain decibel level at the property line and so forth. And that's the reason that number's not in here, is because the state has set.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. And if you're interested what those noise levels are, it's easy enough for I or Greg to just send you the rules and regulations on that. So you can just flat out see it.
Thank you.
Yep.
I do like that, the third party to be checking on that.
Yep.
That is very good.
Good.
'Cause we don't need any noise.
Nope. Nope. And I get it. And it's not, one of the things, and I'm not good at nuance or subtlety. What I would say is, one of the things that when I get pushback from some of the applicants is, well, but wait a minute. Take Harmony, for example. This is a community that has a grain mill. They've already got fans. They've got blowers. They've got noise. Yep, you're right. It's a community surrounded by ag. And in the fall, it can get a little noisy. And other times it isn't. These data centers are 24/7. So they are a different beast. And so to me, these noise regulations are completely fair and appropriate. And they're a good community standard. Okay. Moving on, and so this is more just, hey, here's the acoustical studies we will be requiring. You'll see in there that we do reference the MPCA standards. If you're curious, you can look at Minnesota Chapter 7030. I can certainly forward those on. And we just talk about the standards that we're going to be looking for when that noise study comes in. Candidly, I've read these studies, but it takes a noise consultant, someone who understands the science behind it, to help you work through that. So I can draft the language that requires it, but you'll be utilizing someone else to make sure that they've satisfied it. Again, we've got post-construction testing. You've told us you can meet it. We've looked at reports that says you can meet it, and then we're going to test it. Because all of that does no good unless you actually meet the criteria. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
So that brings up a question to my mind, and that is, we discussed a lot of things that can be done, mitigations that can be done for the noise, such as the type of building structure, and then a berm possibly, vegetation, fencing. When I read through what we have here now, it kind of mentions them all. Is it something where once we get a plan from a company and they say, this is the expected noise, then we would say how many of those to use,
Yes.
rather than say, you have to have a pretty building and cover it up and put it underground and put a fence around it. And
I view mitigating noise as one of those things. When you'd ask your question, can we be more restrictive? We've put anybody applying and reading this knows that we care about noise and we're going to regulate noise. One, you're just going to have to meet the MPCA standards. Doesn't matter whether we like them or don't like them. Those are the standards. So you're going to meet them, period. That's a state law.
Yep.
And to the extent that the study suggests to meet that, you're going to have to put in a berm or you're going to have to do noise dampening things inside the building. Well, those are just the specifics that they're going to have to show us to meet the law or any of our other concerns. So that's exactly where that'll happen. To try and design that in the ordinance on the front end, because there may be technologies that we don't even know about at this point for noise dampening.
Sure.
So let's not limit ourselves. Let's leave it all on the table.
But I mean, yeah, so we're not going to have it. So they have to do a berm and they have to have
No.
a wall and they have to.
No, those are options. What I would say again, and I'm not the noise expert, is my understanding is fences and vegetation aren't probably where you're going to end up. It's more likely to be a berm or other noise dampening things in the walls, things of that nature. Final things, and you'd see this on your just normal development. I don't consider this to be a big component for data centers, but traffic studies, that can be an issue for certain types of developments. We have not seen that be a big thing for data centers. It's a regular building. And so when you talk about decommissioning, what do you mean? Do you mean if it stops being a data center, it can't be turned into a school? These are tip up concretes, nothing buildings, my experience. Maybe they're getting better or different, but are you I would want to understand the concern on the decommissioning and what that means from your perspective. I've heard that concept put out there, but candidly, if someone came in and built a house and they didn't occupy it, we'd allow that house to be there for a while. And maybe the house is a bit of a stretch for analogy, but the idea is it's a very vanilla building.
The other thing I would add is, we're not going to own the building.
Right.
So that somebody's going to own it, even if it's somebody who buys it or at a bankruptcy or whatever. That so that building, it's going to still have property taxes being paid. I guess in some far stretch of the imagination, possibly nobody could want that and it wouldn't get sold, and then it would maybe become the property of the city because they're not paying their property taxes.
Okay.
But seems to me that would be a pretty nice building to have plopped in your lap, even if it's full of
Yeah, I guess
computers and
I
servers.
was thinking in terms of if it was abandoned and then all of the computers and servers were just left there.
Yeah.
But if it's not owned by the city, then it's not really the city's responsibility.
Certainly, if the abandonment leads to other issues, we've dealt with abandoned properties, things of that nature. But the building itself is candidly what drives the property taxes on that thing. So to require it to be demoed or something like that, and then you get into but what financial guarantees are you going to have? I mean, if it's a financially stressed business and they go, there's going to be no money to chase anyway. Questions? That's the application. The next section is where we'll spend the second most amount of time as it relates to the actual performance standards. So I view section 5 as, hey, you need to tell us all the things we just went through. When they say, okay, so here's what we've got. Section 6 is where we lay it over and say, okay, now did you meet our code? Here's our actual performance standards. So if we start, I should get the slides up to date. Here we go. So we start out with minimum lot size. We've got some maximum height. These are things that from my perspective, we included because that's what we, on some initial thoughts, had seen from the folks. There is none of this is statutory. You have the right to regulate these from my perspective, how you see fit. So if you see a number in there that you're not comfortable with, then let's talk about it and let's figure out what makes sense. This is the proverbial line drawing that, in my opinion, a community has the right to do when working through zoning items. So these aren't Soren, the lawyer, said that has to be this way. I felt like this is what I had heard sort of from some initial ideas. And so if I'm going to kind of go quickly through these, but if you have a question on them or have a different thought, happy to entertain it. Or if there's comments you want to give to staff as we start to fine tune this thing, please handle it that way too. So you can see item 1 and 2 talk about lot size, maximum height. There we go. Item 3 is more of just a design standard. 4, there's your exterior finish. Oops. Oh, there we go. Item 5 deals with your accessory buildings. And I think some of these, if I'm not mistaken, we did pull from your existing zoning districts. I don't think some of this is new. Now, if I'm wrong on that, I apologize.
I think that is probably wrong.
That's wrong.
You should be able to put a metal building up. Everything in the industrial park is metal. You should have to put in there. A nice metal building with a fascia would be over my building or
Yep.
anybody else's. That's south and north part. Want to limit it just to.
No, I would defer to the group on all things.
I mean, it's.
Candidly, communities typically go the other way, where we start to make these bigger buildings cost prohibitive with the design elements. So if you're comfortable with metal, that makes life easier on that respect.
Well, like, at least from a frontage or what people are going to see when they drive by, I think decorative rock or block is that good. And then it's up to the plan of the, who's ever trying to come in to meet the
We
requirements.
review that, but with the ordinance the way it is,
It's restricting it.
it's restricting it, but we should add metal.
We can add that.
Because it could be with the way this number 4 is written, it could be a glass building.
Yeah.
So-
Good meeting your noise standards, but fair enough. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, in an odd sort of way, we usually have to have a tussle about, we would like more glass, so we're not staring at a plain wall. But
Monolith,
yeah, I haven't seen the glass industrial building yet, but maybe in Harmony there will be. I haven't. It does not mean you can't. What I would say is depending on what you view of tip ups and things of that nature. I have not seen the metal side of things, but
That would be a typical for everybody here. It'd be a HECO or
mhm.
electric or
This doesn't,
miners.
this doesn't prevent other types of uses from still doing metal. So we're just talking about the data center specifically.
Yep.
I don't know if that addresses the concern.
Well, I think we should give the data center a chance to be able to put up with it.
Yep.
It won't be wood, Alan. I'm sure because of fire, but
No, it most certainly will not. Again, just sort of some performance standards. There has been some discussion about where do we want the utility, you'll see the ground mounted or rooftop mounted. I don't know how big a deal that is for folks. That is something that gets batted around once in a while. Do you want it roof mounted or do we want it on the ground, but then shielded, things of that nature? We've, for the moment, said, look, your choice, and we'll go from there. Parking, again, there will be parking. We have not run into issues with the amount of parking on any of the data centers so far. But it's electricity demand, we've already talked about this. This just flat out says it, that you shall not exceed 55 megawatts. And that's based on usage. Or pardon me, that is based on what we feel we have availability right now. We're going to put that right in the code. It's not going to be some floating standard. It's not going to be something we attach to the CUP. It is going to be in the code. So if more juice becomes available, this is not written in stone. We can increase that at a later date. But as things stand for right now, we did codify the 55 megawatts of juice. So they will have to demonstrate that they can get it done for that.
What type of, if that juice load would change, what type of process would we have to go through to change that in the ordinance?
You're going to be working with my energy on that one, in terms of how we monitor it, what happens, was it a one-time peak, is it ongoing, things of that nature. That's the best answer I can give you on that. What I would say is if we feel we are walking it right to the edge in terms of our capabilities, 55 should become 50. Make them design it for something where we know if there are overruns here and there, we're not impacting the system. And I'm going to defer to the electric companies on how to handle that. But that's been some of the discussions we've talked about.
What if down the road, they say, okay, we have more load, it's not going to impact the city? Could we increase it and how would we do that?
Yep. At that point, we simply, assuming the data center wants more juice, you come in and you make a very simple one-line code amendment that says you can draw up to 70 or whatever the new number is. You'd have to have a public hearing on it, things of that nature. What I've been told, and then just take this for what it's worth, is systems become more efficient. And so as, kind of like the water issue, we didn't want people to use too much water, so they're designing systems to use less water, or at least that's what we're being told. The electricity, we know electricity is an issue. is the items they're using become more efficient on electricity. We're told that that's what they're starting to explore. We will see. I'm not representing that, because who knows? You make it more efficient and then you can stack more in there and you draw the same amount. You know, I don't know, but we'll see.
I don't know if this is allowed. I'm wondering, we have Brian Crambeer from My Energy here. I'm wondering, do you have anything to say about the,
No, I'm very comfortable with
Okay.
the direction you're going, and I'm just here to observe.
All right.
very good, thank you.
If I say something electronically wrong, just give me a little tap. All right. Water use standards, we've covered this a little bit. This now gets into here's what you're going to do. We've got the standards put forth right there. Again, these are performance standards. We're going to rely on Public Works and engineers to come up with these numbers. What we want to make sure is that we create a number that is realistic and feasible such that the use can come in should you want it, but that you can still service all existing uses in a manner that's reasonable and allow you to grow in other areas should you want to be doing that. So if a new subdivision comes in, we don't have to talk to them about how you're not going to be able to turn on the sink or things of that nature. So this is an attempt to do that, much like with the electricity, and that's the number that's before you.
So that piqued my attention, the 60,000 gallons, because we make money. I mean, it's better for all the rest of the water users, the more, I always say, if everybody in town used twice as much water,
Yeah.
we could actually lower the rates per gallon because we have the infrastructure now. So I'm wondering if the 60 is, if we happen to find one that's going to put 40 employees in there, is 60,000 gallons enough for toilets and washing and
Yeah, and I don't know the answer on that, other than that I think most of the 60,000 is thought of in well, I don't know is the answer. What I also don't know is how much water you guys can pump with your appropriation permit. So it's easy enough. I mean, I grew up on a farm. You turned on the spigot and let the water run, right? With city water, you have an appropriation permit. There's a finite amount that you can pump. And so I don't know if this is factored into that or not.
Greg, do you know where we came up with 60,000?
It was looking
You
at
decided.
other heavy users in town, just to get an understanding of what does a building with a lot of people,
Okay.
just people focus.
School and hospital.
And they were using less than this?
It's about
I think it was.
There was about the same.
I never saw what they were using. I just don't want, if they say, oh, we might be using 65 or 70,000, then do we got to go in and
Amend the code.
redo the ordinance?
Yeah, that provision. Yep.
Okay.
Noise standards, we've covered sort of the idea behind that. And this starts to get into more of the detail of it in terms of how it'll be measured, what they're going to be held to. It puts it right out there. You would hope that they would design something understanding that this is what they'll be held to. And most of them, the applications we've seen come through, again, not to sit here and just dwell on water, electricity, and noise, but the applicants are savvy. They know that's what folks are going to be asking about. And so the studies we've seen are pretty involved. It goes to the point we talked about, though. There are certain assumptions being made in terms of, no, the engineers tell us it won't. We do talk about some after the fact testing and things of that nature to make sure that the engineers and the people who built it were right.
So in the case that after the fact testing, it's like more noise than we want.
Yeah, if it doesn't meet the
We can
criteria,
do another,
well, if it doesn't meet the criteria, they're back to the drawing board on building.
okay, yeah.
Yep, it's not negotiable. There are no, oops, I guess we're louder than we should be.
Mhm.
You just don't get to.
Yeah.
Okay, setback buffer and screening. This is something that's discussed a little bit in communities, sort of the.
Do you want to switch?
Did I put that on that? There you go. All right. We'll figure it out. Thank you. Setbacks, something I'd encourage you to think about. One of the things I think makes sense is if you know you have certain sites that are logical spots, is to go out and start to create the footprint that meets all the setbacks and see what kind of building you get. So that's where we've started. Again, that's on some initial feedback we've received. Nothing magical about them. You can do more, you can do less. Some of that just becomes the pragmatic part about it. What I would say is, to me, setbacks are more or less so that you don't feel like you have these structures right on top of the neighbors. We have not seen that setbacks do a really good job of minimizing noise. Certainly, to a degree, the further you are away from something, the less loud it is, but you can still hear it. And there is nothing you can do to, in my opinion, fully screen a 60-foot building. So if you don't want to see a building in a certain spot, don't allow it to be there in the first place. We can try and minimize it so when you drive by, that the trees and berms are higher than your car. But at some point in time, a 60-foot building is a 60-foot building. You're going to see it. And if you don't want it in that location, don't allow it to be there in the first place. Buffer screening requirements. This gets into the nitty gritty of what you can do. We've kind of talked about vegetative buffers, berms, fencing. Different communities have different concerns in terms of what they want. Some don't really care. It's, your choice. It's your property. We're open to all of these things. If we need to get no fencing, just vegetative buffers or things like that, something to think about. Here, we're saying, as long as you're screening it, here's what we will accept.
I got one question on our setbacks.
Yep.
What are you typically seeing in ordinances that you're doing? Are we in the ballpark? Are we way off? Or
Ballpark.
Okay.
Now, what I would say is and you'll read about some of these smaller data centers that are infill, they're repurposing a building, they're not meeting that at all. If you're repurposing a building, you're at greatly less than that. So that doesn't work. But for the new builds, I will say, this is you're in the ballpark.
One thing I look at with the property we have, or is annexed into the city, it's basically bordered by ag land.
Yep.
So I would like to see the ag district scratch from the 500. The 500 is, you want it 500 feet from residential, and probably even further, but does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I think the only thing, and you folks know your community better than I do, when I started out, Plymouth had thousands of acres of ag land. They have virtually none left anymore. And you're not that, but
Yep.
What starts out as ag land can become a residential subdivision pretty quick. So it's something to think about. But to your point, if you're bordering on something that's open fields, what are we setting back from?
Right. Yeah. And then the other thing I look at is, it's only a small part of it's butting up to the Darrell building. So I'm not sure if that's industrial. I didn't.
What if you were to have,
Yeah, the 500 didn't say.
what if you were to have a
industrial.
commercial property come into the front of it? You already got a 500-foot setback from the right of way.
You mean something that came in
Something
after
wants
this
to
is built?
comes in and wants to build in the front of the thing,
Right.
because that was talked about.
So
A business, let's say.
So just to clarify what he's speaking of, at one time they looked at this and thought, if it was a smaller data center, there could be a solar field out there
Oh.
in that 60 acres. They could add solar. They're obviously going to have to put in the electrical.
Substation.
Yep, the
You gotta do that
substation,
anyway.
but then possibly having a couple commercial buildings on the road, that would be screening, kind of you'd see businesses instead of a data center. If, I'm just wondering if the setbacks can incorporate that kind of a concept if.
It depends. You can always do a
commercial or-
variance.
I was thinking
Yeah.
commercial or industrial could have the lesser setback than
If you-
residential 500 feet.
Yeah. I think it all depends on the site plan. What we see is if you know that kind of use is coming in and you can't meet the setbacks, I wouldn't encourage you to do a variance because it really isn't necessarily a practical difficulty, if you will. But it is something that, first time through an ordinance, you're going to spend a lot of time on this, massaging it, figuring it out, doing all the what ifs, 1,000 hypotheticals. And in my experience, the first time something comes through, there's 10 things you didn't think of. And so it's not uncommon on those first applications to simultaneously process a zoning ordinance amendment. And so if the 500 feet doesn't work and you want to put commercial in there, simultaneously with their CUP application is a zoning ordinance amendment, and 500 becomes 400 or whatever is necessary to make it work, and that you can live with, keeping in mind that this is not a one site performance standard. It's for that zoned area. So you'd have to be comfortable with it around. And if you are, you are. The setbacks are really meant to make it so that you don't have conflicts between uses, in addition to some safety considerations. But if you're convinced that it can be closer, easy enough to handle.
Okay.
Buffer screening, I feel like we talked about that. Trees, shrubs, again, these are just more of your performance standards on your screening. I feel like we've kind of gone through that. You really start to get granular on some of the chain link, things of that nature. Just make sure you take a look at that and are comfortable with those sorts of criteria. One of the things, beyond the three things we're constantly touching on is, you have to decide from an aesthetic and functional standpoint, in terms of the materials they're using, how expensive all of those requirements start to add up in terms of expense. So it is something to make sure it fits within the community, but doesn't price things out. Lighting standards, again, we all know there's going to be some lighting. I haven't really seen this become too much of an issue. There are always some of the security issues around data centers, but again, the lighting standards are written such that you're not pointing spotlights at the neighbors. You're keeping all of the light on the site. The one thing, there has been some misunderstanding on lighting standards when we talk about pointing down, things of that nature. Much like I can't figure out how to screen a 60-foot building, I can't figure out how, when you're a quarter mile away, to not look out into the horizon and see a glow. You will see lighting, but it's just not pointed out off-site, and it should be directed down, things of that nature. Just be clear on that.
Yeah.
Generator operation standards, this is something that gets some discussion. Generators in general are loud, and depending on the number of generators you have, the idea of a choir of generators isn't too appealing to most neighbors. We do know that they're going to have to test them. So we do talk about when that would occur, how that happens, things of that nature. We do want to see what their plan is. We have not had really any pushback on that. There is a general understanding that 2 a.m. isn't the best time to fire these things up. And we haven't received any pushback on that. I think to the extent there's ever common sense on some of these things, that tends to be an area where it's exercised.
And there are state and federal regulations on how long they can run too, right?
In terms of the testing, so here we've got the testing requirements right here in terms of when that is. In terms of how long can they run? Well, it depends. Are we testing, or is it because you don't have any power?
Yep. Yeah, I'm outside of testing is
Yeah.
what I'm speaking
Yeah.
of.
And we've got the testing restrictions right there. And that's, we cap it at 100 hours per generator per calendar year. And we do know, depending on the size of the data center and number of generators they have, going back to the environmental review, the MPCA may want to take a look at that.
How many generators might be typical for some of the towns you've worked with?
There is no typical. It's based on the size of the data center And I don't know, I haven't ever scoped it out, 100,000 square feet equals this. I assume, and again, I'm outside my lane, it depends on how many watt, you're using, what do you need for the backup, things of that nature. Yeah, and I just don't know. Okay, so we've gone through the two primary areas, what do you need to include in your application? What are we going to measure it against? We've touched on this, the annual operating report. We want to know that you're, in fact, meeting the criteria we've put out. It's not a set it and forget it. This is we will come back. We want to check in on you. We list the things that we will be looking at. So that is the nature of section 7. There we go. Community benefit agreement. This is something that not everyone has put in. It is something to think about and ruminate on. One of the sort of for all development, but especially as it relates to data centers, is the idea that, and we touched on this with the electricity, that the city won't be putting any money into that system. The data center, if they're going to locate there, any and all infrastructure, things that are necessary, they are going to be expected to pay for themselves. So sort of, if you're going to build it, that's fine, but we're not going to subsidize it. You have to pay for yourself, so on and so forth. And so we try and touch on that.
So section 7, I would really prefer that to be that it could be upon request of the city rather than just stated that they have to do this, because we're going to know exactly how much water they use because we send it to them and we'll have a meter. So, I mean, it's like we're going to be billing them every month for the water, and then we still want them to go through the paperwork of a report to us about how much water we sold them when we know every month how much we're selling them. And then we have to have somebody in the city office recognize that report from them and then maybe report it to the council that they received the annual report. I'm just like, I don't know, My Energy is going to know exactly how much energy they used. So I just don't know. It seems nitpicky to make everybody go through all these steps when it's obvious. Am I missing something there?
Seems like your city might want to know how much energy.
You're keeping them honest.
Yeah, within the limit,
We will.
and we might want to know the emissions too.
You're
I
keeping them
think it's
honest,
useful.
Steve.
Well, then I'd just go back to the water. So we want My Energy to tell us how much energy they're using.
No, they will.
They gotta tell us because of the franchise fee. You're gonna wanna know that,
Okay,
especially if they increase it.
well, then I guess I'd just go to the water, because I just think we know exactly how much water they're using.
Yeah, but if they're filling out a report, what's the difference if they add the water to it? It's a report you're gonna get. You're gonna get a report listed out with those things. You look at it.
I guess I would also
That's the way I
add,
look at it.
I might also add some type of noise measurement as part of that as well. If we're going to have a system for making sure that they're meeting all those requirements, I think noise might be part of that too.
I think that's back.
Is that in the noise? I think that's
Yeah,
in the
I'm trying to
noise.
remember.
Yeah, I think it's bad for us.
Just a reminder, you guys, make sure you're speaking into the mics so people can hear. Please.
Wasn't the noise in
The noise
once a year, or they have to, or how was it worded?
City may order an additional noise study once per year during peak operation.
Which section are you
Yeah.
on?
7, or,
5D.
Yeah.
5-7D is actually where we're at.
yeah, 570. Assessment.
Yeah. 57D, yeah, there we go. The city may order an additional noise study once per year during peak operation of the data center facility. The data center operator must provide the results of the noise study conducted by a third party to the city within 30 days. So if we want to double up and put that into section 7 to make sure that it's part of one report, we can certainly do that. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to balance all the hands here. Any other questions on section 7? We touched briefly on 8, sort of the idea that they have to pay for themselves as they go. We talked about maybe there are other aspects for them to contribute to the community. What I would say is that this is something that you are seeing crop up. There is an idea about limited authority on this, so it is an evolving section. So I would encourage us to think about that before fully deploying it.
One way I think about that, I look at it, and maybe it's because I'm the mayor, and maybe it's because I'm on the city council. I would like to see the money come in from property taxes. That's up to the discretion of the council, right? And then any electrical franchise fee would come in. That's basically up to the discretion of the city council how to spend that. And if we maximize those dollars, then the city can direct them towards preservation of resources or donations to the, whether it's going to first responders or the fire,
Yep.
for fire equipment.
Traditional ad valorem, yeah. Section 9, and we're getting close to the end, is permit revocation and default. There's always the questions of, well, what happens if they don't comply? What I would say is, you're going to have a building out there. You're going to have a fairly large investment by someone out there. The idea that the building will get torn down or things like that aren't how it works. What would happen is they have a conditional use permit to operate the data center. Theoretically, if after you've met with them, talked to them, given them an opportunity to correct the problems, if they don't correct it, you initiate a process to revoke the CUP, which means you no longer get to do business. And so that is the ultimate hammer in all of this. Notice of violation, we do talk about, hey, here's the process for notifying you. It's not going to be a, jump out of the bushes and just take away your permit. So we talk about, we will have to give them notice about the nature of the violation, what we expect them to do to correct it, time frame for compliance, and then under Minnesota law, the same rules and regulations that it takes to implement the CUP or what it takes to revoke the CUP. And so they would have the right to a public hearing and of course to make any arguments they want. And again, it would be a public hearing, so the public could be involved too.
I'm going to forget to mention this, so I'm going to mention it now. But I just saw something in a state, I don't know if it's a law, what it was, but I saw it said, they used the word shall, and it was kind of optional. So do we have something in here that says shall means must? Or can we just replace all these shalls with must?
Yeah.
A new state document I just saw.
We,
Shall.
What I'd say is we have not included that level of detail in this ordinance. If we want to do that, I would probably put that in your front part of your zoning ordinance or even your city code in terms of rules of construction, things of that nature. Corrective action, I feel like one way or another, we've kind of covered that. We are going to have to allow them to at least an opportunity to correct it. Part of this is, and the law recognizes this, is if someone comes in, makes an investment, and the political mood is that this is okay, if in 4 to 5 years the political mood changes, they do have a vested right to this use. And I want to be clear about that, is once they're here, as long as they are meeting the terms and conditions imposed by the council at the time, they get to keep doing that use. It is not a different city council. We're now going to take it away. that right vests with that land, and it is not tied to the applicant. It is not tied to the business. Any approvals we make here, or should you do it through the CUP, are tied to the land. So it runs with the land, so to speak. And it's not something that you can phase out or take from them at a later time, unless they violate the terms and conditions. So I just want to be clear on the permanency of that. Enforcement actions, again, we just kind of lay out whether we actually put these in the code or not. If someone doesn't follow the rules, you always have the right to revoke. You always have the right to bring a legal action to enforce it. We just spelled that out in your code so it's clear. And again, the revocation. We do here talk about if we revoke it, there may need to be some decommissioning, things of that nature. What I would say is, just in terms of expectation setting, realistically, if we end up revoking that permit, what decommissioning looks like on these things is a bit unexplored at this point, and whether the money will be there, whether we're going to have to get a legal action to go in and do that. It's there as an option. Again, I think one of the things as leaders you'd have to decide is if it's not a data center, do we really need that building to go away, or do we just wait for the next user? So it's not something we need to figure out here tonight, but the decommissioning, this is not the same as a power plant, if you will. I understand that there are analogies being drawn, but in my opinion, it's not the same. Transparency, this is the final section. If you've read anything about data centers in Minnesota, you know there's a debate about non-disclosure agreements. Some communities have signed them. You are putting in your ordinance that you will not, that everything you do will be transparent to the community, that you will not sign non-disclosure agreements, that everything that is submitted is subject to the Data Practice Act, which means everything that is submitted is presumed public under Minnesota law. So if someone wants to see what you're seeing, they're going to get to see it. And so we have included that provision in there. We had 2 hours. It is 7:23 or so. Happy to answer any questions. And if not, I'm not a big make short meetings long kind of guy, so.
I'll toss out a general question for you, Soren, just for everybody's benefit. We did our own brainstorming to come up with a list, and you did a pretty good job incorporating that. Is there anything we're missing, you think, that we should be more focused on or considering?
Excuse me, people out there?
I just asked Soren if there's anything we're missing that we should further be considering or diving into beyond what he just covered.
I don't believe so. What's hard is tell me what you don't know. I feel like in terms of the ordinances we're working on, this is one of the more comprehensive ordinances. I especially think with the updates we've done on the noise items, this covers all of the elements. The thing where I don't know if there's items that are missing, but the areas that I've fully transparent about this, we're continuing to learn about water consumption, electricity, and noise. As we learn more, or if we're given other ideas, we'll certainly take a look at it. We have certain restrictions around noise because of the MPCA regs. They've said cities can only go so far, and they've adopted the standards. There are other things to consider with the ambient noise or other performance criteria. And then electricity, you've said, here's how much we think that you can use, but candidly, that's based on the companies. Hey, here's how much we think we can give them. Water, you've addressed that in my opinion, and you control that switch. So I think you've really covered the items that are the biggest concerns. The item out there is the environmental studies. Should we get an application, and if an environmental review is necessary, that'll gauge the temperature of the room real quick, candidly, from my perspective. So I think you have a good ordinance. Anything that is worth drafting is worth reviewing comment on. It's worth reviewing pushback. If you see something you don't like or something that needs to change, or hey, you forgot about this, completely open to that. This is meant to be a real earnest first swing. Tried to incorporate all of your comments, concerns, and then take the lessons we've learned from other communities.
So We've let the people know that this comments aren't for tonight, but they can give us written comments. If we get good or bad, I'm not going to describe what they would be, but if there's comments we get from people that we'd like to incorporate, right? Oh, we kind of missed that, didn't talk about it. Is our process, and I'm asking Greg too, is our process going to be to have like another working meeting where we go through the ordinance and, you know, if we're going to change the setbacks for 500 feet to be residential and not worry about commercial or ag, is there a meeting where we can be together and do work? Because we can't, you know, no more than two counselors or two
Yep.
committee members can speak.
I'll defer to.
Yeah, that's a great segue into talking about what are the next steps. So the traditional ordinance approval process is it starts with planning and zoning, gets vetted, gets recommended to council, council considers it. So this is a little unconventional in that we've got all three boards learning together as we go. So what happens next is really up to what you guys feel is needed next. It could be another meeting of everybody here to go through what we've learned and, you know, kind of ruminated on a little bit to further vet it. Or it could be that you say, this is close enough, let's get planning and zoning. Or you could relay feedback to Alyssa, for example. She come up with a list and say, Soren, here's the things we've collected. Let's tweak it here and there and then come back. So a lot of flexibility with what happens next. And it's all to best serve you guys at how you can consider this, make good decisions.
Yeah, in my opinion, I'd like to see comments from everybody that wants to comment, that's sitting here tonight. They're thinking, they want to talk, but they can't say anything. So I'd like to be able to read all the comments people would make, and then have a meeting of the whole group again, another working meeting to kind of narrow down what we're actually going to have for an ordinance that would go to planning and zoning and the hearing. Does that
So
work?
it's certainly feasible to have another joint planning session meeting with all three bodies if people want to.
Where does the public comment come?
We can cover that maybe after we know for sure that's the route we're going. Is that, I guess, is everybody up to that, up for that? Would be
Does
the-
anybody not want to do that?
Yeah.
Say we should try to set a date or, you know what I mean?
So what exactly are you talking about? Another meeting like this one? Or one that involves public comment?
It would be another working meeting. It wouldn't be public comment because we'd have all the public comment.
So
Right.
do we want to have the public hearing and then come back? Is that?
No,
Well,
I think
you
the public
could-
hearing would be for the finished product, right?
Yes, you will have to have a public hearing no matter what
Okay.
along the way. So yeah, what I'm hearing Steve suggest is do a round of written comments, come back, work on it, and refine it, and then kick it into the formal process where there would still have to be a public comment period where anybody could come and speak again, or for the first time, whatever they chose. So that's one option available.
But my vision is a working one where we would work on it. It wouldn't be public comment. They can be here to listen to us, right? But then we'd have a product that we would send to the public hearing first, and then or would it go to P and Z first and then the
P and Z traditionally, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Or they could-
if all the hard work's done, that might be a very short, quick, easy meeting.
Sure. And that maybe could be the end of the meeting. If
How much
the joint meeting ended, P and Z could make their
How
recommendation.
much do we have to change?
I don't know, I haven't seen comments yet.
So if people like that plan, it would behoove us, I guess, tonight to pick a date where we get the band back together here. And then also, to tell the public how best they can participate in that, as far as do they send comments to, does Alyssa, the master compiler, or is there somebody better or different? Or is it, I guess, I don't know if Alyssa, you want that job or not, but
Well, we're gonna have a meeting, we're gonna want the comments at the meeting, so we can look at the comments and add them to the meeting, right? We're gonna have a meeting meeting of all the boards again, might have the comments there.
You're gonna
You
get
might want 'em
comments
ahead of time.
before
You don't want them
Yeah.
ahead of time. And I think we open comments for a period of time, whether it be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever.
Yeah.
Shut them off so that they can compile them, and have an opportunity to review them before we come to the meeting, so we're prepared to make changes if necessary or not.
And I'm suggesting a week to receive comments and then we can get them to all three boards. So we can set a meeting anywhere between 10 days and 2 weeks from now.
Could I suggest 2 weeks for comments if people are out of town right now and might not be able to get back and do it within a week?
Well, you can write a written comment wherever you are in the world.
We might,
would-
Somebody's in town.
I would agree with that and do 2 weeks. I
well,
think 1 week gets a little short.
So 2 weeks from today would be August 19th.
That the comments would have to
Acceptable to
be in.
you, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think 1 week's not much time for somebody who might have obligations.
That's just when comments are
If
done.
they're out of town. Oh,
Okay.
No, that would be just, the comment
Well,
period
that's
would
just
be
the
done.
comment.
Just a comment period, yeah.
Yep.
yeah, and this isn't formally required, so we get to make our own rules for this part of it, of course.
Okay.
So,
Everybody good with 2 weeks for the comment period? We can set in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, another
3 weeks, I would say.
3 weeks.
Give it a week to
So
review.
3 weeks from today. So you want to steal the mic?
26.
Okay, so if we say August 19th, comments all need to be sent in and to my email address, which is on our website. So it's Alyssa@harmonymn. I'm gonna say that again, Alyssa@harmonymn.gov. My first name, ALISSA. I will compile all the comments, make sure you guys have them ahead of time. And how soon are you gonna want to have the meeting then? Do you want a week to review comments before we meet?
I want at least a week, yeah. Maybe, why don't we meet again 4 weeks from today?
September 2nd. would have been-
So
Yeah, normally parent-
we'll plan on having
If you
another,
want to do it in 1 week after that, that's okay, but then you got to get the comments out that same day they're coming in.
yeah, true.
No, that's a week.
So
to get 'em out.
have another joint planning session meeting on September 2nd. Is that what you guys are saying?
I'm proposing the 26th.
I would also go
Get
with
you-
the 26th, just so
Yeah.
more of us are here. And it's not the first week of school,
Oh,
which
yep.
gets very busy for a lot of people.
And could you not
I,
compile some comments, send them out?
Well, that still
Compile
gives us a
yep,
week
I'll
to-
I'll work on them as
all
I
the
get them.
boards.
So hopefully,
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
She doesn't, yeah, she's just gonna receive all the comments and then she'll forward them on to us.
Right.
Same
Yep.
day, actually, the next day. The other thing I want to state is, everybody knows us up here, whether it's tomorrow or the next day, or 2 days before our meeting, the 26th, you can still comment to anybody. It's just for if you want to give us written comments, that would be by the 19th.
Basically, if you want to provide a written comment that all the boards are going to see, because we cannot disseminate those comments between all of us, otherwise we're violating open meeting law and stuff.
But again, you can speak to any member of any board anytime you want. Is there anybody opposed to the 26th?
Me, I'd like to have it maybe the 25th if possible. Just because it's a Tuesday and I probably won't be able to be here on the 26th. I'll really try.
there's 3 of us that have a meeting on the 25th,
On the 25th?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like,
5 at 5:30.
A quick interjection here. Would people want Soren in attendance, if not here in person, by Zoom? Because if so, we need to take that into account when setting the date. But if we're comfortable taking the next step ourselves, then that's less important.
What I'd say is, with the assistance of Alyssa and Greg, we've drafted the ordinance. I'm around to help review any suggested edits. The second will be tough for me if you want in person. The 26th is a maybe. But I will certainly work with staff or whoever you want to review the comments coming in, to give my feedback on, and if it's just tweaking setbacks and things of that nature, candidly, I don't envision myself offering you a lot on that kind of things. If there's new concepts, we can try and get in front of that, and maybe that means coming down, maybe that means zooming in or something like that. But I think if the meeting, and I'll certainly try and be here if you want me, but if the next meeting is to take what we've done, incorporate changes, and it's kind of tweaking, pulling, tugging, I think we can do that either remote or ahead of the meeting.
So we could tweak it, come up with agreements as it sits, and then send it back to you and have you send us like the finished product for the public hearing.
I would say the 25th or 26th.
I can't hear you, and I don't think anyone else can either.
We're gonna have to go with the 26th probably, because you got meetings,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Miles.
I'm just saying, if 26 doesn't work for anybody, let us know. But if the vast majority of us are good with the 26th,
6 p.m.
I'd make that a motion.
Do you need a
Are we
second?
gone, Tara, or not?
Second if you need it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I'm not sure if that's,
I don't even know if we got a.
what about the other boards?
I don't even know if we
We don't
really
need
have
a
to vote
joint,
on it.
okay?
Made it before.
Yep, public notice, yep, okay, good. Okay. Motion died.
Even though it was second.
Do any of our board members have any comments they wish to make?
Let's thank Soren for making the drive.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful day.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Steve, are we adjourned?
Yes.